Hello, and welcome to the weekly voice chats of the Men's Human Rights Discord server. We are the semi official server of the Men's Rights subreddit. This week's topic is the story coming out of Denver for the Homeless Basic Income Project that is excluding men. The plan is to give homeless people a stipend of money every month for a year and then study the effects. However, single homeless men, will not be eligible. Now, this is copying essentially the same model that they use in the UK, with single men being more or less ignored and left to die on the streets. So I'm going to post a couple of links. You won't be able to see them anyway because you can't click the screen, but you can click the description box in this video, and we will have links to this story. Now, this is another example of male disposability, and this is another example of why it makes no sense to say that men are the privileged gender. If we lived in a patriarchy where men systemically held power over women, you would not see these kinds of laws or programs being implemented. You would not see the privileged class being excluded from something so basic. Now, what's especially sick about this is that three cahoots are getting three different amounts of money. One group is getting an initial payment of $6,500 and then $1,000 a month. One group, I think, is getting an initial payment of $1,000 and then I think it's $500 a month. Then one group is getting $50 a month, which is essentially nothing. You could help so many more people if instead of an initial payment of $6,500, it was $3,500 or $3,000. You could essentially double the amount of people that you're helping. But instead of helping more men, you're not helping any men whatsoever. They're only going to be helping women and non-binary and trans homeless people and families. But I wonder how many single fathers who are homeless with children, if there's many of them even around, would be helped. So that's something worth keeping an eye on. This story is definitely circulating and making some outrage. A lot of people are noticing. And I've noticed that even in places that would be considered somewhat progressive, people are kind of picking up on the fact that men are being excluded. This is a screenshot I got from the Denver subreddit, which would certainly be considered a progressive place. You can see people looking at this story kind of with one eye slanted a little bit. I don't know if that's a real saying, one eye slanted. I have no idea what that even supposed to mean, but you could see some of the comments saying, isn't this ironic? We've come full circle on gender equality. If men and women are equal, then men should be at the front of the line with women to receive help, be saved, etc. And someone underneath commented, especially if men make up 70% of all homeless. And this is the problem with this plan, aside from being sexist and discriminatory and awful, is that it's not going to solve homelessness, because how can you solve homelessness if you're ignoring the majority of the homeless population? In London, the vast majority of the homeless, or rough sleepers, people that actually live on the street, people with no shelter or no accommodation at all, are men. London homeless policy, the government of the City of London's homeless policy, under Mayor Khan, specifically said that helping homeless women is more closely aligned with the homeless policy than helping homeless men. As a result, homeless men really have nowhere to go. It's blatant. We're seeing this blatantly being done. It's intentionally being done. So you have to ask yourself, whose idea was it to exclude men from this plan? We know who it wasn't. We know MRAs didn't suggest discriminating against an entire gender. So who do you think, what kind of organizations, what kind of ideologies do you think pushed the idea of men being excluded? My guess is it would be feminists, or pro-feminist organizations, or pro-feminist politicians. My guess is the people who put this together, and the people who support it, people who support the exclusion of men, are probably people who consider themselves feminists. And I'm going to investigate that I'm going to be looking more closely into the people who came up with this policy, the people who wrote this policy, and I'm going to do some investigation as to their political leanings. I wonder what I'm going to find. If it does come out that the people who put this together are pro-feminist, it doesn't very well align with when feminists say that feminism helps men too. And what this is justified by intersectionality. Feminists say, well, intersectionality is looking at different axes of oppression and vulnerability. And of the homeless population, homeless men, single adult men, are the least vulnerable. Therefore, they're the least in need of aid. But of course, at the same time, they'd say, well, in the business world, female CEOs are the most vulnerable of CEOs. Therefore, there should be programs or grants to help them. So under intersectionality, more aid is given to a wealthy businesswoman than a homeless man. And that's not just me claiming it. That's what's actually happening. I'm not making up a claim that intersectionality ignores homeless men. We're seeing it being done right now. So by no means is this story over. And people are wondering, well, how come I haven't done a video yet? Believe me, a video is coming. But I'm not just going to be talking about what's happening. That kind of speaks for itself. I'm going to be looking closely into who's doing it. What are the leanings of the people behind it? What ideology do they use to justify this? And I think it's going to be very telling. So that is the topic for today. I am going to open the floor. Remember, we want you guys to speak up. We want it to be a communal talk. So if you have something you want to say, by all means, do not be shy. Anyway, that is my introduction.
Thank you, Blue. Now, I think it's quite interesting that the commenter is saying, oh, we came full circle, and now we're in a situation where men are being discriminated against, when in fact this has been the case forever. This has always been the case with homelessness. There's actually a fairly famous, well, at least in our circles, video from the UK from like the 1970s or 1990s, where parliamentarians are hearing about homelessness, and they're like, ha 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 ha, in like a very upper class sort of way. You know, just very amusing that you'd want us to do something about these weeks. And I think that's pretty much what we're dealing with here. Homelessness has effectively been illegal in the UK for a couple of 100 years now, in that they brought in a act against homelessness which fines you up to £1,000 a day, I think, for begging. And
I rather one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I concur with you. It's right. We haven't come full circle. We haven't come anywhere at all. We've stayed exactly where we've always been, and with regard to lending women extra empathy, extra leniency, extra charity, and ignoring men and those in that regard. And also, I'd point out that, as far as I know, only the Fox News article on the matter actually identifies men as being the ones left out. Everywhere else you see language like, this is the money will go to women and families or something like that, that kind of, obscures the fact that men are excluded from this. And even the Fox News report, the guy and the video, I left a link there in the chat. He says it doesn't even bother him that from the equity standpoint, but only from a data collecting standpoint is he upset that men will be excluded.
And that should be a reminder that the right wing is not inherently pro men's rights. This is something people often mistake. They think that the men's rights movement is a right wing or conservative movement. It is not. We very often find that some of our strongest critics come from the left, but by no means do conservative and right-wing politicians do a whole lot to help men, because they don't. And I even made a video reviewing Donald Trump from a men's rights perspective, and in my opinion, overall, he was worse for men's rights than he was better. The only good thing that he really did for men, and I agree it's significant, was the when Betsy DeVos had the reforms for how campuses review sexual assault. But from the and we're getting off topic with that. I did see some other sources where men were directly listed, but what I have yet to see from any source from any publication other than a men's rights website or publication is any source that talks about or even mentions or brings up why is this unfair? Is it controversial to leave one gender out? Is it discrimination against men? I haven't seen one source that directly says men are being discriminated against. This new program is a sexist program. This new program should be considered unconstitutional. I haven't seen that anywhere.
Well, it's unlikely you will. The article from Denver City Council explicitly says that this is for homeless women and gender minorities like trans people who are on the streets. It explicitly ignores homeless men. We can see this as intersectionalism in action. This is intersectionalism divvying up funds for the most vulnerable, quote unquote, and then using them in such a way that essentially steps over and around men. So instead of spending $2 million on a new shelter or on new facilities or whatever that could help homeless people generally, they decided to spend this money by just giving it out to people. Basically, it's a benefits scheme, and while that will help the individual people, I feel like this you could have done an awful lot more with 2 million than they have, because this is only going to help 100 people. This is according to the council. Only 100 people will be helped.
Okay, so I found a list of the names of the people who are involved in the organization, the Denver Basic Inc. What's the actual name? I just want to get the actual name right. The Denver Basic Income Project. So these are the people who are behind it. Please do not send them any harassing emails of any kind. Not that I have to tell this group that. I know you guys know that. But it will be interesting to see how many of them identify as feminists and how many of them describe this as a feminist project or something along the lines of feminist or intersectionality. Because it's interesting when you go to the website, the What We Do, you can see that they say that their goal building, their projects are grounded in social justice. Let me show you where I'm seeing that. Grounded in social justice. So obviously to them, gender discrimination, social justice. I have a feeling I know what I'm going to find.
Well, they're going to be framing this as a corrective. They're going to be looking at it that women are the ones most victimized. If they're out on the street, they're the ones who are most vulnerable, the ones who need protection more. It derives from instinct. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it best to raise that these people are acting out of an instinctual impulse that is not grounded in fact or logic, but just is they're being essentially sort of chivalry puppets. They're being puppets to their own instinct to protect women more than men.
I don't think that's instinctual. I think that that's cultural.
Well, no, of course it's instinctual. I mean, I can even demonstrate exactly why throughout the evolutionary period, why it was beneficial, why there was survival value in hominins protecting the lives of females more than males. It's clear. Women give birth, men do not.
Yeah, I'm just not sure that's where it's coming from with these people.
Well,
Yeah, the people in London. I'm struggling with her name, but I remember the woman who was an MP in Hackney who pushed for the £1,000 fine. Was later appointed as the London Deputy of Policing and Crime. That whole crowd is definitely nefarious. They had some extremely cruel rules. Like London has a 5-day freeze law where if it's below freezing for 5 consecutive days, then they open up shelters that men can access for free. So if it's only below freezing for 4 consecutive days, you're forced to stay outside. They also have a 3 nights law where in order to qualify for housing, you have to be seen sleeping in the same location for 3 nights in a row. Well, guess what they task the police to do? Move them around so they're not in the same place for 3 days in a row.
That's very, very interesting. It's like they're trying to create rules that they can easily game to, you know, twist the system to like reduce the amount of money they have to spend and to reduce the amount of caring they have to do for men. I mean, obviously, they're probably not going to be moving the women around half as much. They're going to be going like, "Oh, you poor thing, you're out on the streets," you know. And it's always the same with everything. Men do not get any sympathy when they're out on the streets. Instead, they get seen as threatening, even though most homeless men are just normal guys. They're not really, you know, really violent or nasty people. But it's, I mean, you can get fights and brawls and things with the homeless, but that's like, you know, just something that happens in any situation. Like you get those same sorts of things at a Friday night for non-homeless people. So it's not really. What I'm saying is that people view homeless men as a kind of a threat and an inconvenience, and they view homeless women as vulnerable victims.
Well, of course,
And this is something that you see in every society.
look at the difference in sympathy between the term bum versus bag lady. You know, back in the day in the 50s and 60s, the homeless were virtually all male, and they were referred to as bums. The first females that became homeless were referred to as bag ladies.
Yeah, it's interesting. Feminists say that men are considered the default human, and that may be true, but they don't see the bad side of that as well. Men are seen as the default homeless person, just a bum. But when it's a homeless woman, then all of a sudden it's not just a homeless person anymore. Now it's become a homeless woman. And you see a great significance, as Tim points out, in the empathy. But what really makes me angry is we're not saying that vulnerable homeless women shouldn't be helped. We're saying that homeless men who are also vulnerable should not be completely ignored. And the fact that we actually get resistance to that is very telling.
One thing they leave out when they're talking about men being the quote-unquote normal side is that what they actually imply there is that women are special and that they are the better half. They are the they're like a minority of people who need special attention. And this is something we've seen with them smuggling women into women and minorities in the in legislation in various countries, as in special protected status. Yeah, it may have been missed out by people as it was growing past, but Drew Acid Katana has some experiences from the other side of being homeless, in that they've been to a fair few shelters recently due to their own housing situation. And as a trans male, they've said that if they actually identified as a trans male to the shelter, they would get kicked out. Oh yeah, I'll try and read it out for them. Okay, so Acid says, how many of the services have you had access to that actually cater to men at all? Acid says, there's none. Several support women, but very few support men. I believe that male Eugene shelter does not allow children, while the female one does. A shelter that allows women and children in the same room as men was shut down because they did not have a permit to do so. As a trans man, I would have been kicked out of several shelters, brackets, if I had been open about it. A male friend of mine had a medical issue where his girlfriend had to be next to him because he would have tic attacks that would cause him seizures, and he would break his neck if she did not hold his head. They refused to let him move, and she took longer to notice when he was having one.
Well, this also brings up then another point. With these homeless men that are excluded, can they simply claim to be women and make themselves eligible for this payment then simply by saying I identify as a woman?
I know I would. Like straight up, it would be the first thing I did.
Absolutely based.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm writing them an email now, which I'll cut and paste here so you guys can see what I say.
Yeah, it's probably best not to do that on Streamblue, where there's been a lot of quiet gaps that I've got to cut out. Okay, so does anyone else have any experiences of being homeless that they'd like to talk about? Yeah, Acid's saying that the only ones that really allow trans people are youth shelters. Youth shelters tend to cap out when you're like 22 or 24. So if you're older than that, you're off to the male homeless shelter, if there even is one. And male homeless shelters aren't necessarily very nice places, if they even exist, where in the local area. Often they're just a big room where you get to camp out. It's at least warm and dry, but your chances of having your stuff nicked are fairly high. Your chances of getting COVID are likely very high, and honestly, it's not a nice place. You're thinking of like this is the sort of church hall sort of thing, where like they pull the benches back and you get to camp out on the floor. This is a sort of it's a very, very limited sort of thing. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to get one of the shelters where they give you an individual room, which is the standard for a lot of shelters which cater to women.
Okay, so if anyone wants to read the email that I sent, there it is. I will read it out to you guys. Dear Denver Basic Income Project, I have a question regarding your homeless pilot program. The majority of Denver's homeless are single men. Your program excludes men, so I'm wondering if there is any concern for how this program will successfully produce a model to eliminate homelessness. If this program expands, will homeless men be eligible at any point? Also, I am not clear what the reasoning is for excluding men from the project. Different sources are giving different reasons. Thank you, Thomas Carney. Let's see what they say.
I mean, I'm pretty clear on why they're doing it. It's because of the social justice thing. They're militant SJWs and they have a hate boner for men. They think men are the patriarchy, the problem. They think they're privileged. And so male homeless people are, more privileged in their minds than the female half of that team, which I think is the dominant half, but it's difficult to tell from some of those names.
But they'd be the same people to support more business scholarships for middle class women while giving homeless men absolutely nothing. I mean, at some point, you have to question how much of it is hate motivated. How much of this is just sexism? How much of this is being done intentionally?
Well, it's all very intentional. The question is just if it's malicious, I think. But these sorts of programs are very, very common. If you come to the UK, homeless men are right at the back of the queue. If you're not a woman or a minority or disabled, you are right at the back. And even if you're disabled, if you're a man, you're right at the back. They really don't care if you're like freezing on the street and you've been there 10 years. Anyone with children has, any woman with children has priority, of course. And honestly, I do think the only situation where you should be given priority is when you have children. But women with children get priority. I don't know what standard is for men with children, but obviously those are a lot rarer. Basically you have to be a woman. If you're a woman, you are right at the front of the queue, and then it's if you're a minority of some kind, and sorry, I repeated myself a little bit there.
And I would argue that homeless men aren't in the back of the queue. They're not in the queue at all.
That's probably a good way of thinking about it, because by the time those resources get to men, they're already used up. And so the next bout of resources then starts at the beginning of the queue again. And so functionally, homeless men never get to the front of the queue. So the only way for them to really get shelter is to squat, which is to say to find an empty house, break in and use it as if it were your own house. But obviously that's not really a great solution, especially since getting money as a homeless man is incredibly difficult. Sitting out on the street getting money is very, very difficult. You are liable to get a couple of quid an hour at most. A lot of people will give you food, but you don't really get much of a say what food you get. It's likely to be chips, fried things, and so on. Meanwhile, there are a lot of fake homeless women. Like, if you see a woman begging, there's a very, very high chance that she's not homeless.
You mean in the UK, right?
Yeah, I mean in the UK. I've been up and down streets looking at the homeless before, and most of the women you see will have jewellery. They'll be there for half an hour to an hour at most, and they'll get a bit of money, and then they'll probably use that money to go clubbing or something. It's they get more money, and they are likely to find shelter quite quickly if they are actually homeless, but generally aren't. A good way to find out is to ask other homeless people. Like, find somebody who's got like an actual bedroll, because those are the guys you should actually be donating to. The ones with a bedroll or a bunch of carrier bags full of blankets or similar. Uh, and it's best if you ask them what they want and what they need before you go off and buy them anything. But yeah, there is actually a woman who pretends to be homeless near me. She's got a great big gold chain round her neck. She's got a mobile phone, expensive skinny jeans, expensive purse, and expensive jacket. Her clothes are worth about twice as much as mine. So if she's homeless, then the homeless are doing pretty well. So yeah.
And see, the point I was getting at in my email is if a pilot program is like a test run, see if they can expand it to something bigger, they can use lack of men in the pilot to justify a lack of men in whatever the final program is. They could say, well, we didn't study it properly, we don't have enough data on the effect it'll have on homeless men, therefore it's an inefficient use of resources. I know that's what they're staging this to be.
I've met
You're very
NCFM,
likely right.
the board of the National NCFM, aware of this issue, and I'm curious to see if perhaps the legal group might think there's something we can leverage out of it. It is absolutely blatant, so perhaps we could sue them.
I think we should make a story out of it, even if we don't win. The story is worth a lot. Getting people talking about it, thinking about it, getting them to stand in front of the camera and explain why they're cutting men out is worth a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. There was a I think there was a famous quote a while ago. It's this guy accused this other politician of something, and he's like, "Oh, I know he didn't do it, but I want him to stand up on stage and deny it, because having to deny something automatically makes you look guilty." And it's but when that you're actually guilty of something, having to explain yourself in front of a camera is something horrific. So if Tim, if NCFM are willing to like try and do this, then I am happy to donate as much as I possibly can to it. We'll have like we'll open up funding from the Discord server to help fund it. We'll do anything we can.
Appreciate that. NCFM has recently become in line for a fair amount of money. Really shouldn't be spreading that around because it's not absolutely a done deal yet, but
You know what could be something that could definitely grab some national headlines? Is if we, and this would take quite a lot of funds, but if we did something in Denver, like we opened up a shelter or we have a program of our own, obviously much, much smaller.
That would be pretty amazing if we could pull it off. We would need somebody in Denver to help us.
And it would be expensive, unquestionably. Maybe it could be a fundraiser. Denver's a city.
Actually, Denver's a city.
Might actually also be a county as well.
I think there is a Denver County, but the state is Colorado. So it is actually pretty cold there at winter, I think.
Very cold. It never goes a winter without snow. It's a mile in the air. It's a mile above sea level.
Anything is better than nothing. Equality for all.
Yeah, the average temperature in December is 18 Fahrenheit. The average in January is 19 Fahrenheit. I think that's the average low. That would be at night.
What's that in Celsius?
About -9-ish.
That's frigid. That's absolutely frigid. It's
Exactly.
survivable, but it's frigid. It's
Oh no, it's -10. No,
that's pretty cold.
a
Yeah,
minute.
so if anyone is in Denver, please, and is willing to help us with this, please let us know. We do need somebody physically there if we're going to try that. But Tim, if you want to try and sue the guys, then we'd absolutely be on board with that. Maybe you can use the money to set up something like that. But actually, that'd be a good idea. Sue the council, then use the money from suing them to fund a proper homeless shelter there.
Yes, wouldn't that be something?
Really like that.
Yeah, that would be a force multiplier in terms of the what's the word, publicity.
Well, let the board know that you're interested in helping out.
Thank
I
you.
think we should make this into a
And-
project. I know I am.
Yeah, this could.
Feminists always say we don't do anything. Well, let's do something.
All right then. We'll have to ask around, see if anyone lives in Denver. But well, let's see if we can do this. Okay, so anything else related to this anyone would like to talk to? You know, I bet that they thought that through this and were like, could anyone sue? And then we were like, it's all homeless men, they can't possibly sue. So they just sort of shrugged and were like, we can get away with this.
Well, it's our duty to make sure they don't get away with this.
Yeah. This is quite an egregious and open and shut case, I think. I don't think they've got a leg to stand on.
Yeah, it's about as objective as any sexism ever gets.
Right then, I think that things are winding down, so would everyone like to call the stream here and then talk about something else, or just talk about something else on air?
I say we end the stream here and then just go to casual chat.
Okay then, if somebody could give the outro, that'd be good.
I got it. Thank you, everyone, for coming this week to our weekly live chat in the Men's Human Rights Discord server, the semi-official Discord server of the Men Human Rights subreddit. We are here every Saturday at 1:30 Central Time, 7:30 UK time. We always enjoy hearing what you have to say. If you ever have topics you want to recommend, you can contact Ma, Blue, or myself, and we will see you all next week.